Well, hi there, it's Chris Chapman. I'm the president of the IIC, and this is a true Pan-Asia webinar. I apologise that you've only got a screenshot of me, but my camera's just gone down in the last couple of minutes. I'm here in Sydney, and our experts are scattered right across Asia, and so it's an absolute delight to have the opportunity just to welcome you all and to make some brief introductory remarks to this IIC Asia webinar on regulation in times of pandemic, and really interestingly, lessons for the future, being an Asia perspective. The greatest intellectual curiosity I have in the space in which the IIC operates, given the irreversible effects of digital disruption on what I call the real world of the wider economy and society. And this is born principally of my decade-long chairmanship of the ACMA. And the curiosity I repeat without exception at each and every IIC forum in which I participate is this: how can we exploit the exponential growth of digital technologies while at the same time building in appropriate regulatory and policy safeguards into our government and business models, and also being cognizant of and having the agility to deal with externalities. Now, not surprisingly, I'm yet to come close to hearing a coherent, simple answer. And why should I? The scope of that question is truly immense. But we will need eventually to address it. And an allied observation is that we, and I always collectively throw into that government policymakers, industry players, citizens, consumers, and the regulators, will need a legislative framework that helps regulators actually meet the challenge of crafting and implementing tailor-made, fit for purpose and increasingly light touch interactions and interventions that can move in timeframes to match the pace with which the regulated and increasingly the non-regulated industries are moving. So I say again that we need to at least accept that we need an existential re-evaluation of regulation, as it's absolutely central to some of the big questions of our age, about the type of economy and society we want to be, about the distribution of power in that society, the allocation of value between different groups in society, and indeed across generations. And I said all that often and before the coronavirus spread rapidly around the world earlier this year and progressively shut down our lives as we knew it, not discriminating between demographics and wealth or postcodes or zip codes. As anyone could get the coronavirus, that meant that for a moment at least, all of us were in this thing together. In many of our countries, this realization has inspired solidarity for the most part and for the moment, and produced outcomes and in timeframes that were unthinkable only 6 months ago. Now, we're going to hear from some of our expert panelists on some of those outcomes from across Asia, and I'm very much looking forward to that. Before I hand over to Dr. Peter Lovelock and Thomas Abel, who are going to act as our moderators, I just wanted to quickly say that the IIC is not immune and give you a heads up on its agility. We've evolved the IIC program to an online program during this current global crisis. The IIC team have worked extremely hard to develop a program and back office systems, although quite a learning curve for all of us. However, that hard work has paid off, and we've seen many positive results from the complete transformation of the delivery of IIC programs. And the webinar today is just another sterling example. So before today, we've held across the globe 9 interactive webinars, attracting so far over 2,000 participants, and we've got upwards of 200 today. All webinars are available to view online, along with reports from each webinar. Many of our IIC chapters have contributed to the program transition, for which I thank them for their support and hard work. Their support is also appreciated by our members, as we have indeed received much positive feedback from those members around the world. Now, as we move into Q3 in August, September, October, the IIC program will continue to deliver online events and meetings, including the IRF, the International Regulatory Forum, which will take place in October as scheduled and be hosted by the Canadian regulators CRTC as previously confirmed, although now clearly as an online meeting. And in Q4 of this year, we're going to start to see the re-emergence, hopefully, of our face-to-face programs. Now, Peter Lovelock, you are an inspiration to us, an IIC director. I'm going to hand over to you following what I would term my brief introductory remarks.
Thank you very much, El Presidente. My name is Peter Lovelock. I'm the head of the Asian regional chapter for the IIC, and I run a research consultancy called TRPC, which I'm hoping many of you are aware of. So thank you, and thank you all for attending. And I'm going to call out a big thank you to our speakers and to my co-moderator Thomas from ADB in a second. But look at where we've ended up in this period all over again. We're back big time to connectivity. And it's somewhat astounding for us, because at the start of this year, we were mapping out an IIC agenda for the region and for Singapore and neighboring economies. And we were looking at running our various workshops on AI and the frameworks and the policies needed for AI, the ASEAN 2025 Digital Master Plan, digital trade standards, cross-border data flows, and digital transactions. There was an agenda emerging around a number of these topics. And yet, here we are, focused on connectivity and essential services, work from home, online education, remote healthcare, track and trace applications. We're right back in the midst of connectivity and the importance of it. And that made us stop in the midst of the IIC's framework that Chris is talking to, and reach out to some of our friends around the region to talk through what the regulators have been facing and how they've been looking at tweaking the regulatory frameworks they have to help enable and accelerate some of this focus on connectivity, as it has become so central both to getting through the pandemic and as we get prepared to start reinflating our economies. And so I'd like to thank Thomas Abel, who I'll ask to introduce himself briefly in a second, from Asian Development Bank. We reached out specifically to the ADB because we've been doing a lot of work around the region with the ADB on a range of those topics, and their focus has come right back into these areas. And so we're thrilled to have Thomas here. Very quickly, what I'd like to just flag is the running order. We have 3 esteemed regulators from Singapore, Malaysia, and Indonesia. We will be going to each of those speakers and asking them to give a few comments. We will start this discussion up, and the point that I want to make here is how interactive this session will be. You have, for those of you who are attending, you have the chat boxes. Please contribute any questions that you have or any clarifications as we go, and Thomas and myself will help to guide that conversation, because we'd like this to be a discussion. And with that, Thomas, can I hand over to you to get us started?
Sure. Thanks, Peter, and thanks, Chris and Andrea, and all the folks at IIC for inviting myself and ADB to participate. And thanks for the great speakers who volunteered their time to speak today. And I think it's going to be a great forum. And also thanks everybody for joining. So just a quick introduction. You know, ADB is in the middle of the COVID response. We've announced a $20 billion program that we're actively rolling out. And we are also suffering from the pandemic ourselves, all working remotely and trying to get our jobs done. And as Peter said, this has really shifted the conversation. You know, we have been planning for and supporting the transition to the digital economy, and that's part of my role. You know, as the Chief of Digital Technology, I have a new group within ADB that's actually helping us make that transition and helping our developing member countries. And the pandemic basically has accelerated all of those trends. And as everyone knows, we'll hear more about this, that, you know, people are forced to do education online and healthcare online. And it's really highlighted the digital divide, especially in our region, where you still have, you know, roughly 50% of the population unconnected. So this has become a bigger issue within ADB. And I think clearly policy response is one of the most important areas where, you know, where this can be solved. So we're hoping to hear more from our speakers today on what they're doing and what lessons they might have for other countries and other development professionals across the region in this area. And ADB is definitely interested in partnering, and we're interested in learning as well what some of these lessons are. And we've actually also been transitioning our events to online, and we've hosted many of these internally for our staff, because everyone is definitely ramping up to what this new normal is going to look like. So with that, then I will go ahead and introduce our first speaker, who is Eileen Chia from Singapore. She's the Director General of Telecoms and Post and Deputy Chief Executive of Policy Regulation and Competition Development of Infocom Media Development Authority of Singapore. The IMDA is a statutory board of the Singapore government and regulates the Infocom, media, and postal sectors, and comprises the Personal Data Protection Commission. She also seeks to create a competitive, internationally connected, and trusted environment to enable the development of Infocom, media, and postal sectors in Singapore through the formulation and implementation of policy and regulatory frameworks and developing of strategies for these sectors. She holds a bachelor's degree in economics and master's of public policy from the National University of Singapore. And with that, Eileen, thank you, and you can take it from there.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Greetings from Singapore. I'm doing this from home. We are working from home during this difficult period. I have my slides up, and so if you don't mind, I'll go to the next slide. Yeah, so before I start, for those in the webinar who's not familiar with IMDA, I thought I should explain a bit of our role, because as I go through the experience or our measures that we have taken to deal with COVID, it's important to understand the role of IMDA. So on the right, you will see our traditional role of a regulator that regulates the postal, the telco, the media industry. So that's the traditional regulator role. And of course, we do have with us the data protection role as well. But IMDA being unique in some ways, we have the enabler and industry development role with us. So in a way, it increases the toolkits that we have in responding to the situation we have on hand, which is COVID. So you see the circle that says enabler. So we do some of the master planning work on connectivity, digital infrastructure, some of the standards, looking at readying the manpower, the tech and media manpower, and also readying the society in terms of adoption of digital technology. Then on the circle to its left, which is industry developer role, this is where we look at how we make sure that the telecom, or rather Infocom media sector, develops as an engine of growth in itself. You know, how do we bring about initiative that helps the Infocom media grow, expand, innovate? Then the last circle we have on digital champion. This is where we will look at initiatives across various sectors of our economy to help them digitalize. So it's in this context that I'll go through some of experience as we deal with the COVID situation. Next slide, please. Yeah. Okay, so as you can see from the screen, digitalization has always been a key strategy for Singapore. We don't have natural resources, so people and technology, digitalization, innovation has always been key focus in terms of how we grow our economy. The COVID situation has, in a way, shown that digitalization is critical, has never been so prominently felt because of the need to social distance ourselves, restricting our movements. So schools, social activities, business activities have gone online. Because to keep ourselves safe, I think many countries have had to implement lockdown periods. Singapore has ours, but we call it a circuit breaker period, not lockdown, circuit breaker. It's 2 months to break the sort of circulation of virus in the community. So during this circuit breaker period, the only way to keep things going is on the digital platform. And many segments of our society is affected individuals, the seniors, the low income, businesses, especially the SMEs. So I'm going to focus on how we deal with these more vulnerable groups in this climate. Next slide. Okay. Being a small city-state, I think we do have a unfair advantage. We are well connected. On the left of the screen, you'll see that Singapore have a nationwide fiber infrastructure that goes to all home, and we afford 1 gig sort of connectivity at affordable rates. The 4G coverage connection is good, and it's also very competitively priced. So during the circuit breaker period, we found ourselves relying on these 2 infrastructure significantly to get things going. So when we went into the circuit breaker period in April, we had to prepare the telcos, work with them to preemptively increase their infrastructure capacity to up the number of licenses, the hardware investments, to increase the bandwidth connectivity in order to deal with the amount of traffic that's going to come on board. So we know that typical home traffic is unlike business traffic. Typical home traffic is usually peak in the night. But because the economic activity is going to come into the home during the day, social activities as well, schools as well, we need to enhance the capacity significantly in order to make sure that we are able to handle the load during this period. Next slide. So while we ready the infrastructure, we realized that the demand side needed help. So the regulator is able to work with the telcos. This is the sector we regulate, right? So we're able to get them to look at the infrastructure. But for the business, the households, and the society, we need a different suite of measures to go out to get them to embrace the digital technology in order for them to cope with the situation where they cannot function in the sort of physical world, in the physical medium. So for the businesses, the SMEs, we look at solutions, pre-approved solutions to help them get online. This is the group in Singapore that traditionally has not been very digitally ready. So I put up there the food and the retail sector in particular that has been badly affected. So all these have to be shut. So how do they get online? So we look at solutions like e-invoicing, adopting some of the European standards, the Pebble standards, which Singapore embraced as our national standards for e-invoicing, e-payment solutions, accounting, simple stuff, payroll, HR, how do you do digital ordering, how do you do online food delivery, simple data mining analytics. So these are the things we packaged into packages and then put in quite significant support for these sectors to adopt and then bring their businesses online. And then there are also other SMEs who does not have a sort of a working environment. It's not like us, with laptops and we are with Microsoft and presentations, etc. So we again have to package solutions into laptops that comes with laptops. So things like collaboration tools, virtual meetings like this, queue management, temperature screening. So again, we have to package some of these more practical solutions for businesses to quickly adapt and then get themselves and their workers to work from home or work remotely. For individuals and households, again, schools have to shut for 2 months, and tuition centers, you know, one of the important critical support facilities for parents in Singapore, have to shut. So you can imagine the amount of anxiety brought about to parents. So learning has to go online for 2 months. So the needy family really needed help. So we have this new PC, what we call new PC Plus program. It started actually 20 years ago, but we enhanced it to make it almost literally free for kids from very needy family to get a broadband connection free, to get laptops near sort of free situation, to bring it home and then get themselves connected to schools and be able to learn together with the other schoolmates online. Seniors also, because they are all cooped up at home, as we come out from a circuit breaker, how do they keep themselves safe? So for the sort of working adult like us, we're very used to using our phones, the apps, etc., to get around, but not the seniors. So we again have to have schemes to work with the telcos to develop schemes like $5 for 5 gig of data plan, phone that comes with just 20 Sing dollars, to get them online. And then you look at the society, it is coupled with what we set up with the Singapore Digital Office within IMDA to reach out to these seniors. We recruited about 1,000 or still recruiting 1,000 ambassadors to fan ourselves out, put in programs, workshops, etc., to get seniors to go onto basic apps like, for example, even just WhatsApp, you know, to keep in touch with family members. How to do e-payment, how to read QR code so that they can get around Singapore safely using some of our apps like Safe Entry or Trace Together that we have doled out. So these are the schemes that we have put together to help the seniors. As of another unique feature is the hawkers. These are actually food centers in Singapore. And again, how do we get them to embrace QR code, digital payment, rather than deal with cash? So these are the two, what we call the last inch of the digital gap that we have decided to put some effort to close it during this COVID period, so that everybody can open up, you know, after come out of the circuit breaker and a more safe environment. Next slide. Okay, so I've talked about what are the sort of immediate measures that we have taken as IMDA working with other government agencies. So besides the more immediate measures to deal with the current crisis, we are also investing for the future. Many countries have started to look at 5G. Singapore too, about 2 years, more than 2 years ago actually, we started this journey of looking at spectrum, what is the policy approach, what's the strategy forward for 5G. So with COVID, I think we decided not to stop this the pace of work in this area. We issued a call for proposal in October last year, if I recall correctly, and then went through a two-phase or two-step sort of award process. And in June, notwithstanding the thick of the COVID, you know, period, we decided to still award the call for proposal to two operators to build 2 nationwide network as a start. Singtel and the consortium of M1 and StarHub will build 2 nationwide network. TPG, even though it didn't get the sort of nationwide network license, they are still able to deploy a localized network using millimeter wave. So the nationwide networks will be built using the standalone 5G technology, while the millimeter wave will be the technology for will be built based on non-standalone, because the standalone technology is not in sight yet. So we thought the investment infrastructure continues to be important. It is even more so when we looked at how fiber benefited Singaporeans, the businesses and the people, which we started almost 10 years ago. So in a way, it strengthened our belief that we have to invest ahead for the future. So with the investment, we hope by end 2022, we'll get about 50% coverage nationwide. And by 5 years' time, 2025, we'll get a nationwide coverage using the sort of early wave of spectrum that's being adopted for 5G. Spectrum's coming on board, so we'll continue to refarm them for 5G. Next slide. And because our mandate is beyond the sort of regulatory role, we work with colleagues across IMDA to look at the 5G demand ecosystem. So there's a huge set of effort that's put in, not wearing our regulatory hat, but our digital champion or our enabling hat, to work with industries, sectors that we found promising, for instance, the smart factories, urban mobility, smart transport, smart estate, for instance, estate management, consumer applications, maritime, ports, to see how we can encourage demand, early users, early adopters, enterprise to try, to solution, and to see how 5G can be incorporated into their business processes and business environment, and improve the way they work. So that's in a way what I have to share for the session, talking about how we use the technology to address the current need, invest in longer term. These are just some of the examples. We have, of course, other agencies in Singapore furiously working, to introduce digital technology to replace the way we have been functioning in the physical world. And hope that's this sharing is useful. I think Chris talked about the new norm. We don't know what it will be like, but one thing for sure, we will continue to double down on investing in digital technology and investing in our people in this skill sets. That's all I have.
Great.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Eileen, for that great presentation. And I just want to check, Peter, are we doing questions first, or are we going to do all the presentations first?
We're going to run through the presentations, Thomas. If you have a quick question to Eileen, go. Otherwise, we'll
go ahead then.
Okay. So it might just be worth calling out, Eileen, that the IIC has a podcast with Kiat Ho Tung, the recent CEO of IMDA, running through the initiatives just before he finished up, and that podcast is on the IIC website. I did like, by the way, the idea we're moving from the last mile to the last inch. My first question is going to be, when are you guys going to go metric and move to the metric measurements? But we can come back to that. I think we're going to dig into the resilience issue as we move forward. But one question I might just pose to you very quickly before we move on is that additional capacity that has been provided. We've seen a lot of countries around the region, around the world, adding in capacity through this period. Do you think it's going to get pulled back? Do you think that we're going to see the increased data rates and digital demand decrease when we begin to exit this? Because one of the working suppositions right now is this is part of the new normal, that there will be much more digital traffic.
Thanks, Peter. As a system on the whole, if you ask me, I think the amount of data and the traffic and the sort of reliance and utilization of the digital infrastructure, I do not think it will pull back, because once we're used to the way we work in online, the convenience it brings about, I do not think it will pull back. But what we talked about pulling back is probably in the profile of the traffic. Traffic in the home environment had just gone up many folds. You saw the daytime traffic just went up, similar to the night peak load, and it stays there throughout the day. But of course, as we open up, this traffic will shift back into the business world. The business traffic literally tanked, during this period. But as the business activity shifts back, you will just see the shift of traffic from one segment of the user group to another. But my sense is the overall traffic will just remain high and will continue to grow. That's my sense.
Okay, thank you. I expect I'm about to see questions coming through from my Netflix friends saying that they believe people are still going to be chilling with Netflix at work when everyone goes back. But we can come back to that and the resilience issues. We'd like to move across quickly to our Malaysian colleague, Mr. Mohd Ali Hanafia. Ali, thank you very much for stepping in. Ali Hanafia stepped in at the last minute to fill in for the chair, Dr. Fadullah, who, as I understand it, has been called away by the minister to engage in some parliamentary issues that have come up. So thank you very much for stepping in. Ali is the Chief Corporate Officer for the Malaysian Communications and Multimedia Commission, as we all know, the MCMC. But one thing that's worth calling out about his role is that at the start of COVID, since the start of COVID, he's been dual hatting as the chair for MCMC's crisis management team, the COVID crisis management team. So you are, it seems, exactly the right person to have on. So thank you very much for joining. And if you'd like to give us your initial comments.
Yeah. First of all, thank you, Peter, and also IIC for inviting the Malaysian Communications and Multimedia Commission, the MMC, to participate in the session today. Obviously, COVID-19 is something which is very new to all of us, not only within the country, I think within the region and also throughout the world. And with MCMC as the regulator for the communications and multimedia, we manage the internet, we manage the postal, e-commerce, courier, and so forth. So everything becomes a new chapter for all of us, and then we need to address the challenges that's coming into the picture. I was made the crisis management team chair for the MCMC for the organization, but it doesn't stop there. We also have some liaison with external bodies, such as the Ministry of Health, the National Security Council, and other relevant agencies, and also not forgetting our telcos, our service providers, and so forth. So let me just, I have some slides. Let me just go through the slides. Go to the second slide. There are a few approaches in addressing the pandemic. What we have here on the slide is that we utilize ICT to break the chain, to flatten the curve, and to also to facilitate slow exit from our movement control orders, MCO. We have a few phases of the movement control order. Singapore uses the circuit breaker. We have movement control orders. We started from as early as 18th of March, and until today, we have been into 112 days of the movement control orders, but there are phases to it. But today we are much more relaxed. Businesses have already been opened up. Economies are already coming back, into how they were before. So the approaches that we have taken is there are four of them. One is communicating. The next one is monitoring, and then we have managing, and we also have curbing it. Communicating basically is we use all the broadcast and online mediums to communicate to the masses what is the COVID situation, on a daily basis. And we have daily press conferences by one of the senior ministers of defense on non-health matters, and also a press conference by the Ministry of Health on health matters. This is carried through live, through the free-to-air TV and also online channels. And although SMS is actually a very old technology, we use SMS blast on the key messages and updates and it reaches out to 44 million of the mobile users in Malaysia. It's very effective in that manner. And we also created official channels, Telegram channels for our Ministry of Health, our National Security Council, and none other for them to provide the instantaneous updates. In terms of monitoring, we created a COVID-19 platform as a central depository of the COVID-19 patients' information using big data for monitoring purposes of the National Crisis Preparedness and Response Center and the National Security Council. The COVID-19 Information Hub, or the MyC19, gathers public sentiment and also analysis on the COVID-19 using AI and also data analytics. Now, to support this, the Global COVID-19 Index, GCI, which is a holistic and comprehensive index to assess the current situation and recovery progress of the 184 countries around the world. So we have a dashboard that shows what is the situation in the country, locally, domestically, and we also have another dashboard to show what is happening around the world, so that we know how we are addressing the pandemic, what is happening, and so forth. In terms of managing, we created apps. There are a few apps that we have created. What is shown over here in the slide is the My Sejahtera app, which is actually a self-assessment, contact tracing, and also information on treatment of hospitals, clinics, and hotspot trackers. Another one, which is MyTrace, complements the My Sejahtera app, which is also contact tracing using Bluetooth. And apart from that, we also assist the government with installation of about 1,200 AI terminal scanners at about 144 government hospitals, 21 public higher education, and also selected rural schools. And public messaging on determining the factual accuracy of news, public messaging on the positive use of the social media. In terms of curbing, collaboration with the telcos, the telecommunication service providers, to quickly identify infected persons and new clusters using location data for contact tracing and also geofencing. And a dedicated COVID-19 tab in what we say as sebenarnya.my is actually a portal that we have created to curb false news, fake news. And we created, it has already been there all this while, but we created a tab just for COVID-19, which is a fact-checking portal and also an app to counter misinformation. We also have virtual health advisory portals and apps such as Doctor on Call, BookDoc, which provides private healthcare consultations via messaging, phone, and also video calls to ease the congestion and workload of the public health services. So far, there's about 266 investigation papers that has been opened by the police and also MCMC ourselves to investigate fake news on COVID-19. It's quite a challenge, but we are managing it well to identify the culprits and also to cut the increase of the fake news, especially on the COVID-19 related. Next. Right, in terms of ensuring connectivity, what we have done is that we have provisioned free Wi-Fi at key quarantine centers. There's about, I think, about 200 over quarantine centers across the country, and also priority locations such as hospitals and also Ministry of Health, wherever they are present. Working with our telcos, service providers, to optimize their networks and also to improve coverage, because as we know, the focus has shifted from the business districts or business areas to the residential areas. And another thing that we have worked with our telcos is for them to provide free 1 gigabyte data daily for 10 hours from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. From the beginning of the MCO. And this has been quite useful for the people, for the masses. And from there onwards, because it has been prolonged, Right now, until today, we have extended it to 24 hours since recently, since June, for the use for productivity and information-related services. So they can use it for accessing to e-classroom, getting on applications such as GoToMeetings, Team, Microsoft Teams, 365, and so forth. On top of that, the telcos are also providing zero-rated access to the apps, as what we mentioned just now, the MySejahtera and MyTrace apps, and also when they want to access to health and news sources such as the Ministry of Health, WHO websites, and also free calls to our crisis preparedness and response center, CPRC hotlines. Now, apart from all this, there's also an allocation of about Malaysian ringgit 400 million, which is about $93 million for the telcos to improve coverage in critical areas. These are such as in hospitals, government, and also enforcement agencies, and also media centers. Because of the increase of in traffic, we've heard about the increase of in traffic just now in Singapore's case. So it's also happening here in Malaysia. So these additional allocations coming from the telcos, they will use it to improve the coverage, expanding the data, the capacity, and so forth. Now, this is with regards to adapting to the new normal, and also at the same time digitizing the economy. We are looking at three prongs. One is to stimulate the economy. Second one is to propel the businesses, and also empower the third one, which is empowering the people. In terms of stimulating the economy, we have established a fund, an investment fund, to match private capital in the local venture capital space. And we have also created a sandbox, a National Technology and Innovation Sandbox. This is where new pilot technologies is tested, and also we also provide a regulatory sandbox for new tech solutions, and accelerating the digitization of government services through crowdsourced solutions. And we also provided Ringgit Malaysia 50, it's about $10 worth of e-wallet credits to drive contact-free payments. So it goes into the masses. Those who have registered to the apps I mentioned just now, MySejahtera apps, they will also be credited with this 50 ringgit or the $10 e-wallet credits for them to utilize. In terms of propelling the businesses, it's all about onboarding of the SMEs to e-commerce platforms. This could be through training, onboarding subsidies, sales supports, and there are also grants and loans being provided as well. This is coming from our Ministry of Finance. We have the so-called SME Digitalization Matching Grant, the SME Technology Transformation Fund, and also the Smart Automation Grant. And the government will co-fund digital discount vouchers for Shop Malaysia Online for local businesses as well. And in terms of empowering the people, this is where we support the flexible work arrangement initiative. And there's a series of incentives as listed out there: tax deduction for the employers, which implements the flexible working arrangement, tax deduction even for the employees who receive the mobile devices, notebook, and so forth. And for the gig economy, social protection and skilling in terms of matching grant for gig economy platforms who contribute to workers' injury scheme, and also employees' provident fund, and also the grant for global online workforce program to guide the Malaysians on how to offer professional services to global clients while working from home or location of choice. So these are where we are digitizing the economy. This is after we have addressed, we've come to a certain stage where we have addressed the pandemic. This is about recovery. This is about bringing the economies back to where they were before, to what they have lost before. So in a nutshell, this is what Malaysia has done so far. Thank you.
Ali, thank you very much for that overview. Same question back to you, really, that I asked to Eileen. you have the component of the free 1 gig data daily being provided to all citizens. Is that something you can see going on for some time, or is it something you have a sunset period to where it will be phased out?
Okay, when it was first introduced, we were not sure how the take-up would be, because as you know, the subscribers would have already subscribed to certain package. When the analysis was done, it was actually a popular take-up, and the application, the take-up was tremendous. And it went on for, initially it was supposed to be the first few phases of the MCO. 14 days went by, 28 days went by. I think it went on until 70 days. And until recently, until June, we have extended it from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., extended it to 24 hours, but with concentration on productivity, application, and utilization. So it's quite good actually. The pickup from the public is quite good.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I'm going to come back when we get a chance to talk a bit more to get a sense of what people are using it for. I'm assuming they're not using it for online dating, given the period we're in. But it'd be interesting to see what it is being used for. Okay, I have it. Thomas, over to you.
Great. Thanks, Peter and Ali. Our next speaker is Dr. Ismail. He's the Director General of Spectrum Management and Standardization of Post and ICT of the Ministry of Communications and Information Technology of the Republic of Indonesia. As Director General, he leads a group of 1,500 civil servants throughout Indonesia, and they fulfill basically effective, efficient, dynamic, and optimal frequency spectrum management, as well as encouraging the use of innovative technology that meets the technical requirements. He's currently focusing on how governments can be a booster for the overall ecosystem and being a facilitator. He's been with the government of Indonesia for 25 years, and prior to his current role, he was the initiator of Palap Ring, a pivotal project to connect all provinces and capital districts with high capacity national fiber backbone. So Dr. Ismail, thank you, and you can take it from there.
Thank you, Thomas, for your kind introductions. Thank you, Peter, and my colleague from Malaysia, Pak Ali, and then Alin from Singapore. Yeah, I would like to, I'm happy here to share my views about the situation of the force of the building resilience with digital technology, lesson learned from us, from Indonesia. Let me start from my presentation. That next, please. No doubt that COVID-19 has forced to change our behavior. As you know that we are millions of students now learn and school from home, and we are also working from home, and then online shopping growing very, very fast now in Indonesia because of COVID-19. So at least these three measures of the situation has forced us to change our behavior. And then the impact of this COVID-19 also across all sectors. Almost all sectors now has impacted by the COVID-19, and then there are some gradation of these sectors from starting from the maybe small impact, and then some of very bad impact like tourism. You know, tourism industry now in Indonesia is very collapsed because of this COVID-19. Even transportation also a very bad situation now because of this COVID-19. Especially in the business, as you know, that they have to be survived because of this. There are some key that need to be survival, adaptation, and hibernation of their businesses. And then that all sectors now, they have some keyword now. At least as I know, first one is how to them dealing with and make a rescue team to do as fast as possible to do adjustment in a short time in terms of education, office, banking, industry, everything. They have to make a rescue team dealing with move on from the normal situation to digital world, digital rooms, and then those will be able to benefit too quick to adapt. Who can adapt very quick, they can get benefit from this situation. Some of these businesses can get benefit from this. So that's why the digital transformation in Indonesia now has forcing as soon as possible because of this situation. We can see that this digital transformation is kind of opportunity or burden. So I think that if we can conclude that digital transformation it is very important, and then they can get opportunity situation from this situation. The investment is needed to change their business process and to leapfrog, and then maybe they can capture any potential market and efficiency and new services. So we encourage them from government now that doing a digital way, it not only for the short term, but it is very important to us to leapfrog with the digital ecosystem. Next. So what we need, I mean, government need to do now. One is how we finalize our telco infrastructure. That you know that Indonesia is a very big country. Some of our rural area is not 100% covered by the digital infrastructure. So that's why this is a very important now, because we are change our behavior, change our lifestyle from the normal situation to come to the digital situation. So the infrastructure is a must. So how to speed up this infrastructure? Before we build the rural area using the USO fund, kind of fund from the operators, universal service obligations. But we do believe that this fund is not not enough to cover our infrastructure in Indonesia. So that's why government now changed the approach. We changed to invest more in this infrastructure as the other infrastructure like road, like airport and everything that we cover fund from the national budget. Millions of dollars will be spending to speed up this telco infrastructure. And then the second one, government now in Indonesia maximize to utilize data. As you know, some of increasing numbers data generated by digital platform, and this data very important and very useful for the medium small enterprises. They have to get the accessibility and use this data to make the decision. What they have to produce, how they deliver this production, how they marketing and everything. It is very important. So big data analytic is one of very concern of government now of Indonesia, to using all of data from the platform to utilize and maximize this benefit from data. And then we also promote the local and specific platform and application. Why I talking about local platform? Because as you know, we need balancing from the OTT, from global OTT to the local OTT, national OTT. We need our platform and our local platform also being used by all of the nation, country, all the society in Indonesia, because of we have cover the data of this in this platform. And then we some of us also need specific to solve the specific problems, how to localize and then customize of the problems now in Indonesia with the specific platform and local application. Of course, we are open to promote the global partnership in this situation, but we are very happy to encourage our local and applications to build here. And the next one, this is also very important, is digital talent. As you know that to cover of digital society, digital platform, digital ecosystem, we need talent. So that's why digital talent is very important one. We know it is not very easy to cover it, to solve this problem, because we need so huge of numbers of digital talents based on research from the consultant that at least we need 600,000 of the digital talent per year in Indonesia to cover our digital transformations. So this is our focus of governments, but we know that government cannot do it ourselves. So we encourage our stakeholders. We call it pentahelix that will be covered by government, community, businesses, and academia, and the last is very important, also media. So we orchestrate these stakeholders, how to bridging the community, how to utilize the digital technology to grow the ecosystem, creating local and specific solution through makers movement. We know that it is the young generation, millennials generation, they are growing now in Indonesia. We have a huge number of that. So how to speed up this community, I mean to build this community is very important. And then businesses also, they need to, as I mentioned before, that digital transformation is an opportunity to them. So how to maximize this benefit with this senior management and digital ecosystem, and rethink that business process to minimize the cost, and then to get the new revenue from the digital transformation. Academia also are very important because they need to develop our digital talent and implement digital transformation in education, because this solution is not a short-term solution. We need a long-term solution, get benefit from the digital transformation process. And last not least is media. Media is also very important, how to promote this adoption of the digital transformation, and then to support government, give the new mindset of the peoples about how to use and utilize this process, especially in this pandemic COVID situation. So I think this is our progress, our actions now from government and stakeholders. And then because of Indonesia is yes, a big country, we have more than 260 million people to cover, to support them in how they can do in the new norm of the after the pandemic COVID. It's hopefully being covered by us. I think that's all, Thomas and Peter. That's my views about the situation of the Indonesia. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Ismail, and very interesting, especially the challenges that you have. My initial question for you is, now that you recognize, you know, the pandemic has allowed you to focus more on the expanding connectivity to 100% of the population and moving beyond just the use of the rural access funds, how do you balance the need to expand, say, you know, creating 5G in your urban areas and investing in that versus the reaching the rural areas, and how would you manage that trade-off and that type of investment? Because I think a lot of our member governments in ADB are struggling with this decision as well.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Thomas. This is a very difficult question. I think to balance it. Yeah, that's true. That is our situation now. But we think the peoples from rurals not do the roadmap as the. So we need to jump. Thomas, we will start in rural, starting at least from 4G. So we are not things that cover rurals by 2G or 3G something, but we start from 4G and even ready for 5G. So the speed of the investment in rural now is we think that we jump and we invest to the latest technology there, because we know that also huge numbers of young generation also in rural area, and they are not as like I mean our I think they are also very good enough and clever enough to start with the latest technology because of social media, you know. Maybe our young generation also in rural area growing very fast using of adopt this technology. So the balancing needs we start from the end, not starting step by step like Thomas, but we start from the end. So the latest technology will be coming from the rural areas. I think that's our policy now.
That's great. Yeah, very, very good story. And I think this is a good way of looking that, you know, going straight to 4G for the entire rural area and being ready for 5G so that the young people there don't get left out and continue to be left out. So thank you very much. I will hand it back to Peter. If do you want to ask a question first, or do we want to go straight to the Q&A that we've got the 5 questions in there?
I'm actually going to pick up on, encourage you to pick up on some of the Q&A in a second, Thomas. But Pak Ismail, I just want to follow up because it's, as ever, it's a very extensive plan that you've got, which is very good and very impressive. I don't think you get much argument with the areas that are getting covered. They're all of the right areas that need to be addressed, and it's very positive on digital transformation. I appreciate the focus on the infrastructure, of course. We've talked about this many times before, you and I. But I wonder about the regulatory enablement piece. It's very data driven, which I think we would all be supportive of. I'm just wondering what ComInfo and other agencies are maybe looking at in terms of the regulatory enablement piece to accelerate exactly the roadmap that you've got in front of you. Are there things that ComInfo and the others are looking to do from a regulatory perspective to enhance those data flows, both across the agencies and in support of businesses?
Yes, Peter, data is our, that is our very important, as you know, that especially for personal data, that we have to protect our personal data, and of course the data flow from our countries is need to be discussed, and we need protocols how to balancing between countries to this data flows. We do understand that data very difficult situation that to protect all that, but how to utilize that in the good ways, and then win-win situation from our data and other countries' data. I think we need to sitting together to discuss about the data flows protocols, how dealing with this, and then make a fair and win-win situation. Indonesia, of course, open to discuss with this situation, Peter.
Okay, thank you. Thomas, yes, I think we should move to a number of the questions that have been posed in the chat.
Okay. There's one here for relative to that. I think we were just maybe for Dr. Ali about the opening up of more mobile spectrum in Malaysia and Indonesia, actually, given that the demand will just grow, in particular 700 megahertz and perhaps 3.5 gigahertz. So the question is, what's the status of releasing more spectrum for mobile in both of your countries?
Pak Ali, you first or me?
Either way.
Boleh saja.
Okay, thank you. Indonesia is a little bit difficult situation from the to prepare because our law of the broadcasting law is not enacted yet. We know government put the top priority list of this law to be solved in this year. For 700, and then no doubt that 700 is very important to us because this is a coverage band to cover our almost all nations need to cover by 700, even though we have 1800 and 900, but it's not enough. And then 700 is also very important to cover all of the countries because of this low frequency is very important for coverage band. And then for the 3.5 also we do also have a satellite here in Indonesia, so we have to compromise this extended C satellite to release this spectrum, and then to move from extended C to the C satellite. We have already planning to do that, and then under discussion and under a field trial to harmonize and coexistence between 5G and this satellite. There are many vendors now working with us, very serious to cover, to use this 3.5, because 3.5 is mainly used in the rural areas, so it's not too difficult to start 5G in the urban areas using the 3.5. So a little bit difficult, but we work very hard to clean up this frequency and maybe release as soon as possible. I think that's my
Great. Thank you, Dr. Ismail. And Mr. Ali, your response on that one as well?
Okay, Thomas, I think the approach is kind of similar to how Indonesia is also managing it with both the 700 megahertz, the 3.5. What we have done is that anticipating the commercial 5G rollout, we have executed 5G development projects of 5G DP, and this is through across the country. This is where the telcos and their partners they are conducting 5G use cases utilizing the bands that has already been identified. This could be at the 700 megahertz. This could be 3.5 gigahertz. This could also be at the millimeter wave, 26 and 28 gigahertz. And from there onwards, they would actually come back to us and share on the development of these use cases. And all this thing goes into the planning. What we intend to do is we are going to look at it as holistically. So when we talk about the 5G spectrum award, it should be able to cover 700 megahertz, 3.5 gigahertz, and also the millimeter wave, all at the same time, all at one go. So there could be instances where some will get the coverage band, which is 700. Some would get focus on the capacity band, which is the 3.5 and the millimeter wave. And there'll be a combination, that we can see. This will also be involving the current telcos, and we'll be working closely with them in terms of planning of the spectrum before we start to award to them. So all this groundwork that needs to be checked, and so that we hope we can be equality in terms of allocating the spectrum.
Great, thank you. So Peter, do you want to take the next? Yeah, go ahead.
Absolutely. Eileen, a couple of the early questions on the chat were to you, which is, in my experience, always the case when I see you on stage, that you get a couple of the early questions. Well, one of them was one I actually wanted to follow up on. There's a question about there hasn't yet been full take-up of the Trace Together app, and just how effective you think it will be in fulfilling its objectives, given it isn't fully taken up by Singaporeans. I actually want to segue across. If you can answer that one, I actually want to bring Ali in terms of the My Sejahtera app that's there, and just get the two of you to comment on whether there's any conversation happening about making these contact tracing apps across our various economies interoperable, and whether there's an exchange that might facilitate the bubbles as we all get back to work.
Thanks, Peter. I'll take a step at the question. Yes, I think we recognize that this technology is, some people may be quite uncomfortable with it because we are talking about trade-offs between privacy and health. So while the technology it uses Bluetooth close proximity, it doesn't in a way collect information about you unless you consent. It is a case where information will be given when you are detected as a COVID patient, and there is a need to download the information on whereabouts using the app. Of course, there are technical challenges that the agency GovTech looking at it is trying to overcome. But there are also the sort of behavior, social acceptance issue that we are also dealing with. Similar concepts have been tried in other countries, if I'm not wrong. UK and a few other countries tried this technology. I think at the end of the day, it will be down to the acceptance level of the people in willing to embrace the technology, the trust of how the information would be used, and whether at the end of the day, the society benefits with its implementation. It's probably still a process that we are working through. Whether at the end of the day it will be effective remains to be seen. We are looking at probably dongles and all, sort of a wearable that people can carry. Again, it's something that we are working through in terms of acceptance of this way of doing Trace Together.
Thank you. And Ali, if I go to you, are you seeing similar issues with the take-up in Malaysia? And again, is there any interest, is there any initial conversations in talking about making some of these contact tracing apps speak, if you will, across our various economies?
What is happening right now is the contact tracing application, the one that is in particular is My Sejahtera. The application, the government is actually promoting for the public to actually download and to be involved, with the application. And right now, the usage is actually being expanded to even to entering a premise, be it in a work premise or in a commercial area. So whenever a user wants to enter, they have to actually access and download to the apps. And at the moment, the public seems to be adapting and adopting well, because one of the things is that in the beginning, we actually had like 3 apps that was developed. Right now, we have actually consolidated, and it becomes one single app from the government, and it seems to be embraced by the public quite well. But initially, there was some confusion. Some wanted to, download and also activate one app, the other one, the other app, and so forth. But now we have actually consolidated. There's only one app, and it seems to be working well.
Great, thanks. I'm going to move to the next question, which is on the free 1 gig allowance by MCMC, Mr. Ali. And I guess the question is it supposed to be for information and educational uses, or just finding information about COVID or students studying from home? And the person is commenting that the offer ends December 31st. Maybe there's a question about whether it's going to be extended.
Okay, as what I mentioned just now, when it was first introduced early March, it was 1 gig from the time given from 8 a.m. until 6 p.m. daily, and you can use it for anything, and then for any purpose, any usage. But when we come across the stages of the movement control order, and when we have started to become more relaxed, we were entering the first 14 days, the second 28 days, and so until the 70th day. And when we started to relax, the offering is more focused towards productivity usage. This is where students can actually get the 1 gig, and it's no longer restricted to from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Now it's for 24 hours. But they can use it for productivity apps, such as for the students, for classrooms, e-learning, and so forth. And for those in the business cycle, they can use it for having virtual online meetings, conferences, and so forth. So it has also been extended. Initially, it was only until 31st of August. Now it has also been extended until the end of the year, which is 31st of December.
Okay, and assuming probably would be extended if necessary beyond that, but you don't need to decide right away.
Yes.
Great. All right, thanks. Back to you, Peter.
Pak Ismail, just picking up on the infrastructure issue you were talking through before, and the swing towards promoting 4G across the expanse of Indonesia as we roll out connectivity. There's a question here, which is probably worth unpacking a little bit, around what the plans are to accelerate the release of more access to spectrum for the MNOs. How are you going to go about that, and how are we going to look at striking a balance for MNO usage of the spectrum that's released?
Yeah, thank you, Peter. I think especially we're talking about 5G, we need a very huge spectrum for every MNO, so they can be build their infrastructure in efficient one. So firstly, we introduced the infrastructure sharing, including a spectrum sharing policy. We already proposed the new law that we're talking that proposed to the Parliament, and then I hope in a few months this policy that to open infrastructure sharing, spectrum sharing is very important for Indonesia. Why? Because our MNO is, we have 5 MNOs, so I think not enough to cover the spectrum to cover all of these MNOs. So 1 or maybe 2 of these operators or MNO can become as a netco, to become as a network to share with the others MNOs. So that is the first approach. And the second one is consolidations. We also encourage our 5 MNOs now in Indonesia to consolidate, because the market and the demand have to balance with the supply. Cause of the coverage of the mobile broadband now in Indonesia is quite large. I think the consolidation between 2 or 3 MNOs is more healthy to our market mechanism in Indonesia. So I think that's 2 policy. It is that important to balancing the needs of MNOs of spectrums, and then to overcome the problems in Indonesia. That's it.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
We have a We have a question about cybersecurity and the fact that so many employees are working from home, including government employees, during the pandemic. And now you need to move the sort of beyond perimeter security. And maybe this is a question for all of you, which is, how are you dealing with the increases in risk with your own employees working from home, and with the private sector having employees working from home, or even children working online? We've even had some issues with some of our video conferences being bombed. So what have you seen, and what are you prioritizing in terms of security in the new normal? Maybe start with Dr. Ismail.
Thank you, Thomas. Talking about cyber security, it is very important here, because we need trust. We are now change our behavior. We change from the conventional economic to become as a digital economy. So security is a basic one. So all the people need to trust that using the digital world, that they are safe to use that. So that's why security is very important, and I do agree about this this comment. And then we have to spend budget and everything, and the rules, and then regulation, and to implement ISO standard and everything to make sure that about the security. But there is, of course, there is no one in the world can guarantee 100% about this security, because we need to time to time to change the technology and everything, and this security. So I think this is not only because of not only government action, but this is also need action from every level, every layers, operators layers, and then business layers, and then behavior of the peoples, how encourage them to securitize their data, and time to time to change their password and everything. That is like a culture that need to be pushed. So promotion about the security is very important. We do understand, and then this is a very great, a very huge job need to be done to solve the cyber security.
Great, thanks. Eileen, can you go next?
Okay, thanks, Thomas. So, so we recognize importance of security, like what Dr. Ismail mentioned. So a few layers at the infrastructure. I think it's critical that the infrastructure is secure, especially the digital connectivity infrastructure. So you see the prominence of cybersecurity and resilience sort of being emphasized as we build up the 5G network. That's one of the key considerations when we look at how security by design will be embraced by telcos building the 5G network. So that's, in a way, at infrastructure, a critical component. I think user is another weaker link that we recognized. So during this COVID period, as we push out the initiatives to onboard, the users, enterprises onto the various digital solutions, one of them is cybersecurity solutions that comes packaged with all the digital solutions, so that it's being taken as a package together. You talk about perimeter defense. So again, this is not really quite COVID related, but as every home gets sort of a high fiber bandwidth connection, there's a need at the end of the day to put in some basic requirement as standards. So actually, before the COVID broke, we had gone out and together with CSA on a few, CSA as in the Cybersecurity Agency in Singapore, on a few initiatives to up the cybersecurity posture. So we have recently issued a consultation on putting in basic standards on cybersecurity for home routers, being the sort of gateway for all the connected devices into home. So Japan has gone this way. We know UK is consulting, and we think it's about time to use standards to start shifting the basic hygiene level of cybersecurity in some of these devices. So we started with home routers. And so some of these efforts are going to be ongoing and step up over time as we look at greater dependency on the digital platform for many of our activities. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Eileen. And Mr. Ali?
Okay. I think in our case, it also a similar approach. We have been going through social media to advocate and to advise to the public to be careful when they, when they access the networks from home. And if you can remember, I think a few months back, there was an app that was used for teleconferencing. There was some issue. And we worked together with the other agencies within the country, and they came up with some advisory notes and how to actually use. And we also engaged with the owner of the apps, and they also came up with some advisory notes, and they actually coach the public how they can actually utilize all these tools, and at the same time to be aware of the security concerns, security threats that should be coming in if they do not address it properly. In terms of organizations or companies, we at the same time we take MCMC as the example. We have before the pandemic, we have not that much use of our virtual private network. That since the pandemic came on, became an issue, we have increased the capacity of the virtual private network for utilization of our staff. And whenever they whenever they are connected through the VPN, the virtual private networks, they are secure. They have a secure channel. They have a secure link from where they are right up to the office. And this is another advisory that we also issue out to companies and organizations to have something similar of an infrastructure, so that they can actually control and be aware, of any of the internet concerns or threats should it be coming in.
Great, thank you. And Peter, back to you. If I'm not sure, want to wrap up or one more question.
But it's funny how the questions are ramping up as we come up against the hour, but we are up against the hour. I did actually want to get each of you to respond. I mean, Chris Chapman's initial introduction still catches my attention, of the existential threat that regulation and regulators are under. You're on the front line. The ability to respond nimbly and actively. It would be interesting to get your comments on what perhaps the one tool that we could be using, or what the one real challenge from a regulatory perspective we've got is. But I'd be putting you on the spot as we literally go past the hour. So rather than do that, I'm going to leave that question hanging, unfortunately. I will note that we will collect up the outstanding questions and send them to the panelists, and then we'll put those out there with the materials on the IIC website that we've got. But given that we are past the hour, can I just thank all of you for your participation? I'd like to thank Thomas for his co-moderation and the ADB for their support for this, and to thank Chris and IIC for putting this on as ever. But thank you to Eileen, Ali, and Pak Ismail for their participation. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you.